today's NHSTalks stories. This is a really special edition that we are sharing with the National Hellenic Museum as part of the Permanent Greek American Story. And I'm really pleased to welcome several friends, Jim Dimitriou, Mike Manatos, Basil, Nick, and our moderator and good friend, Frosene Phillips, the executive director of the Elios Society in San Francisco. The National Hellenic Society was started actually 10 years ago as sort of an umbrella organization. Who says Greeks don't get along? Here we are all together, trying to coordinate and work together on themes and topics and issues of common interests. Our sort of specialty is the next generation and looking to engage them. So this is a special edition that will take a look. What we wanted to do is take a look at the history of the church and the Greek American community in retrospect. And these are all distinguished leaders of organizations that will share a look back at how the organizations have changed and what we need to do to engage the next generation. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over and introduce our master, our MC and moderator, Frosene Phillips. As I mentioned, she's executive director of the Elios Society in San Francisco. She serves as director of operations at Gumas Advertising. John Gumas is a good friend and member and the president of that organization. Frosene's an accomplished journalist since 1991. Her column, Frosene on the Scene, features entertainment and dining, news stories, and all sorts of things in the Bay Area. And it's a staple in the East Bay Times and Mercury News. She's emeritus managing editor, really started it and did all the heavy lifting of the Hellenic Journal, the West Coast's leading Greek American newspaper since its inception. And she's an accomplished and wonderful lead singer, that's her real job, of Mediterranean Soul, a Greek band. And we were pleased to have them one time and have to have them again appear that does popular Greek music and some of the old favorites. And she's very active in one of the prettiest churches in the West Coast, Ascension in Oakland. She received her management studies degree from Diablo Valley College. And with that, I turn it over to you, Frosene. Thank you for doing this, and so pleased to have you join us.
Thank you, Art. I appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here, and I always like to. I feel very proud about NHS because they're inspired by Elios, who's been around for over 2 decades and still thriving strong in San Francisco Bay Area. And yes, entertainment is my middle name, and I promise to be entertaining and let the rest of you be the serious folks today. Okay, so real quick, I once again, just to go around real fast and remind everybody who's here, I know you received the bios. We have Nick Larigakis, who serves as the president of American Hellenic Institute. Everyone knows Nick. He's been our friend for decades. Dr. Dimitriou, he serves as the chairman of the American Hellenic Council, a nonpartisan advocacy organization, and it champions Hellenic values. Basil Mossaidis, AHEPA, serves executive director of the American Hellenic Education Progressive Association, which we all know as AHEPA. For Mike Manatos, he doesn't need an introduction because he is everybody's friend, and he's with Manatos and Manatos. He is on the board of NHS, and he does the OXI Day Foundation. He serves in many capacities, and he's just one of our favorite dancers. So with that,
and someone who is proud to say you played at my wedding.
I did.
Right?
So,
that's one of the places we first met.
I am, and I'm actually a church musician first, and I did want to correct one thing about the Hellenic Journal. So I did not start the Hellenic Journal. That was started by Frank Agnos in the 70s as a response to what was happening in Cyprus. So I was given the torch in the early 2000s. So with that, I will put it out to you, gentlemen. We want to discuss the history and the reason for establishing the missions of your respective organizations. If you could each speak to that, I will appreciate
Thank you
that.
very much. It's a pleasure to be on the scene with Frosene tonight. You're a good friend and great to work with you in so many capacities. And I'm really honored to be with this folks on this Zoom call, because you've got here, over 100 years, not to age us, but over 100 years of experience advocating for Hellenism and Orthodoxy. I've worked with Nick and Basil in DC for decades, and Jim for many, many years at the AHEPA, and now with the American Hellenic Council. So this is, I'm thrilled to be on with you all and talk about these matters. As Frosene mentioned, I am the executive director of the Washington OXI Day Foundation, which we started 10 years ago. It's a foundation whose mission is to remind the world of the great debt that we owe the Greek people for helping not only courageously stand up to the Nazis in World War II 80 years ago, this October 28th, but actually their actions were the results of their actions were the freedoms we enjoy today are in great part because the Greeks stood up courageously and said "Ochi." We have our event this year on October 28th. We honor not only those who served in various wars, World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, but also the Davids versus Goliath for freedom and democracy today, who aren't Greek at all, but who on the front page of every publication around the world. An example is Nadia Murad, a Yazidi woman who was captured by ISIS, came out of captivity, and took ISIS to the International Court of Justice, received the Ochi Courage Award from us, and said, just as the Greeks said Ochi to the Nazis, I say Ochi to ISIS. 2 years later, she received the Nobel Peace Prize. Those are the kinds of people who are continuing to spread the message of the courage of the Greeks 80 years later. I'm also on the board of Leadership 100, the National Hellenic Council, National Hellenic Society, and a number of other organizations, but proud to serve the community in these various ways, and proud to appear today with these other giants in our community.
Basil.
Thank you, Frosene, for having us today, and to Art and to the NHS for inviting the AHEPA. It's a thrill for me to be able to be with you today. We, as AHEPA members, AHEPA brothers, are very proud of our 99 years now of hard work in the community. Founded in 1922 in Atlanta, originally to help educate the immigrant to becoming better Americans and to fight off bigotry and racism that our forefathers were faced with. Of course, over 99 years, the mission has to adapt to the changing times. So the AHEPA's tried over the last 9 decades to carve out what they feel is important to the preservation of Hellenism, the defense of Hellenism, and Hellenism being a very large encompassing word, meaning orthodoxy, our religion, our communities. But it's not limited only to, those that are Greek Orthodox. It would be a larger community. It would be of like-minded Hellenes in their communities doing the hard work like other community organizations. We have close to 500 active chapters worldwide now, 385 of them in the United States, in every major metropolitan city, which is composed of individual members. They are restaurateurs, PhDs, students, college-age kids that are trying to advance and preserve what we believe are core elements of our existence as a community. Jim Dimitriou, that's one of our panelists, served as a past Supreme President of the AHEPA. And Nick Larigakis is an active member, as are Mike and Andy Manatos, members of the AHEPA, as so is Art Dimopoulos. So it's sort of a common denominator, I think, in our community that many individuals are members of the AHEPA family. We don't restrict membership to men only. We allow women to join, young women, college-age individuals as well, to join the AHEPA on our national membership. So it's, we have a tradition and a history that sometimes works to our advantage, and other times it becomes sort of a challenge to allow the information to flow that everybody can be a member of the AHEPA. We advocate on Capitol Hill on issues that our members feel are important, and we're always at the ready to stand by our patriarchate. We've joined efforts with all of the groups on the Zoom in preserving our culture and our heritage and our religion. So thanks again for having us, and let's see where this discussion takes us.
Great. Jim, please tell us about what you're up to.
Okay, thanks, Frosene, and Mike and Basil as well. Thank you for allowing me to join the group today, and hopefully it could be an impetus for the future for all of us. There are many things that we do, and I want to commend the National Hellenic Society for their Heritage Greece program, the foreign policy tour that AHEPA does, and the Journey to Greece that I was part of for 6 years with AHEPA, because I think that instills a very important value system in our youth, and one that's a lasting one. I see students from many years ago that still get together, still make a point of being part of things. And this type of commitment to the future is something that's important to all of us. I want to also commend Frosene's church in Oakland that my son's a part of and has been welcomed heartily coming from St. Catherine's here in Redondo Beach. And he and his fiance have been very active in the community immediately there, and has branched out with a group of friends that actually connected with former Journey to Greece students as well in the same area, which has been very good. Those kinds of programs have a tremendous value. They have a tremendous value because our focus, as Art told us, should be on our youth. And when we say youth, it means what happens after the folk dancing, what happens after Greek school. And we have to re-look at that, reconnect with the young professionals. The American Hellenic Council has a very active young professional group that has been going well for us. But again, it needs to be something expanded, not just an occasional social get-together for something. The Greeks in DC had a very popular program, and it's very important to continue as well. But all of us, I think, need to participate in that and bring them in and involved a lot more. Let's expand the youth programs. Let's expand the trips to Greece, but let's also look beyond that and where we can grow from there. The American Hellenic Council, as you probably remember, actually started as the Save Cyprus Council. And I was recruited as a student. My mentor at the time was Dr. Theodore Salutis. And I had just finished my research in Cyprus, having even interviewed Archbishop Manatos before he left. And he recruited me literally from the airport coming home to the first meeting and made me their secretary. And that years later became the American Hellenic Council that I'm back at and serving. And I'm really proud as an AHEPA, as a member of American Hellenic Institute, and our organizations that have that commitment that are here today with us. But let's look at what more we can do. And that I had the idea, and I thank Art for remembering the Unity Forum that we started with AHEPA when I was president. And it's something I think now more than ever, it shows a need that we need to continue in that. And not look at each other as rivals in any way, but the stronger we are individually, we should also be strong as a group and have a focus to the future within that. And all of you have been a part of that, and a significant part. And I think we need to all relook at it and where we can go from here. It is something that is necessary, but also has a great value. As Art said, we're more American Greeks now than we are Greek Americans, and we have to look at that in terms of what does that mean and where do we go from here. And having this kind of meeting and this commitment together, I think is an important first step. And I want to thank all of you and Art especially for inviting me to it.
Nick, my longtime friend, and Papu.
Thank you, Frosene, and I'd like to thank Art Dimopoulos, a longtime friend, and for inviting me here today and for this great initiative on behalf of the National Hellenic Society to have this outreach of these organizations here. Everybody on the Zoom screen today is a longtime friend and people that I've had the pleasure to work with for many years and advocating for issues that have been important to our community here in Washington, D.C. and beyond. The organization, the American Hellenic Institute, began as a direct result of the illegal Turkish invasion of Cyprus in July 20th of 1974, where literally the next day, its founder, Gene Mossaidis, which unfortunately we just lost in early May of this year at the age of almost 93 years old, felt that as a community, we needed to become more mature in our public policy and lobbying efforts, and to do it in a professional manner and not in a reactionary and, as you like to say, a choriatico cafinio style manner. So within that context, he established the American Hellenic Institute, and one of its first successes was to develop the rule of law arms embargo, which was no easy thing to do, to try to pass that legislation on Capitol Hill, considering the kind of leadership that was in Washington at the time. But with the grassroots effort led by AHEPA, AHI had no grassroots, they barely had an office, but with Gene's leadership and Mike Manatos' father, Andy, who worked up on the Hill in key staff positions, and with the grassroots support of AHEPA at the time, we were successful as a community to be able to pass a very, very important legislation and really in many ways give introduction to the Greek American lobbying as a professional and entity in Washington, D.C. that can be reckoned with. Over the years, obviously, the organization has continued to fight and advocate on behalf of a strong U.S.-Greek, U.S.-Cyprus relations. But I want to make perfectly clear, we are not a Greek or Cypriot lobby. We are an American-based lobby at best that supports a strong U.S.-Greece, U.S.-Cyprus relationship as in the best interest of the United States. That is what we promote in the Eastern Mediterranean, an area that has a difficult, tumultuous area. And the countries that are promoting peace and stability are Greece and Cyprus, along with Israel and other actors that have been developed over the years with Egypt and so forth. And we contend that the one who's not playing and who's creating the problems are Turkey. And we need to be able to continuously pass that message to our policymakers here in Washington, D.C., in the promotion of the U.S.'s geostrategic interest in the Eastern Mediterranean. So this is, in a nutshell, sort of our core message. But over the years, we've had many issues that have developed, from the Macedonian name issue to the Patriarchate issue to the Aegean, and so many other things that keep coming into the forefront. And most recently, of course, like every other organization, we look for ways to, and how can we deal with the issue of the St. Sophia crisis that developed just last week by Mr. Erdogan. I'll just finish with one of our most important programs that we have, and that is looking to try to educate, and Jim Dimitriou mentioned this, regarding student programs. We decided over 10 years ago that we need to be able to engage our Greek American future leaders and make them aware of these particular issues. I've been doing this for 33 years, and not only, unfortunately, haven't we solved many of these issues, but more of them have come to the forefront. And it's going to be imperative, if these organizations and our core messaging is going to be able to move forward, we're going to need to be able to educate the next generation of Greek American and really the current generation of Greek American. And with that, we've established this program of a foreign policy immersion program for college students, where we take 10 students every year to Greece and Cyprus, and we start off in Washington. It's a 17-day odyssey, and we immerse them in the issues regarding the Eastern Mediterranean and how U.S. foreign policy interacts within that region. So I'll finish there and hopefully look forward to developing and looking forward to this discussion with all my good friends and colleagues here.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everybody. I want to remind our audience to feel free to send in your questions, and we'll be able to get to some of those at the end of our discussion here. one of the things, the next thing I want to visit is that social capital refers to, you know, the shared connections that people have and the reciprocity, that norms that it creates. So given the dramatic demographic changes, which you pointed out that we're more American Greek now than Greek American, right? What must your organizations do to evolve and remain relevant? Let's start with Basil.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think that's really the crux of why these organizations exist, right? So I touched a little bit upon the foundation of AHEPA, the creation of AHEPA, was to transform the immigrant into a good citizen in America, right? We had education classes, citizenship classes, language classes, teaching the Greek immigrant English, making them go take their citizenship tests. There were other organizations at the time in the late 20s, the GAPA was one of them, that was exactly opposite of the AHEPA when it came to what is the usefulness of using English as the language versus Greek. So is Greek really the measurement, the Greek language really the measurement of you being a Hellene? I guess in 1927 or whenever they argued about it, it may have been, but certainly not in 2020. Measuring someone's, and I'm going to use this word, and you know, it's not, it might be a little cliche, someone's Greekness is not a matter of eating baklava or dancing a Greek dance or talking a Greek word. It's a little bit deeper than that, right? It's almost the fabric of the individual, their existence. And it's very difficult to sort of educate somebody on that if they haven't lived it or breathed it. And all of us as children, my parents were immigrants, so we grew up in a very Greek-speaking home. So for us, being Greek was, I mean, we maintained a Greek enclave. My elementary school kindergarten class was 32 Greeks and 1 American kid. And we would talk Greek to each other and the teacher didn't know what was happening. So a lot like Astoria was, but that's no longer the case, right? So you can't measure that. When we went to Greece for the first time, there was a connection there for us as kids that still exists today. So what I think we try to do as an organization is instill the values that our forefathers had for what it meant to be Greek. Is it our history? Looking back at 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 years of history. I mean, Jim is a history professor. He can talk to you more about that than I can. But there is a connection to that for our people. And I look at that when I look at my son and my nieces and my nephews. What makes them Greek? Is it the blood? I don't know. Is it the language? I don't know. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. So our organization has to adapt. It's adapted throughout the years. Every generation, and now we're in our 4th generation of the immigrant in our 100-year history. Every generation sort of has to refine or define, redefine who they are and what they expect out of their organization. Our group, you know, when you do an analysis of our membership from 1922 till now, we're always hovering around the same amount of people. It's like never. We don't have 1 million members and we don't have 4 members, right? We're always at that 50,000 number. It doesn't change. We initiate people every year, but we always usually stay around the same number. Why? Because I don't think you can really open up your circle and just say, everybody, you know, we're all of like mind and we're all going to do the same thing. It doesn't work like that. So we're in the process of redefining who we are every so often. It's never one and done, because if you're stagnant, you're dead. And everybody on the phone on this Zoom call will tell you that stagnation provides death. I mean, we are exclusively a membership-based organization. These other groups are, maybe they're policy-driven or issue-driven or lobby-driven or whatever. But when you're a membership organization, you better have something that attracts your members, or you're going to be out of business, you know. And with the advent of these computers and the Zoom and internet and Facebook and all that stuff, it's changed the way we do business. It's not business as usual anymore. So I think adaptability is really the answer to the question of how do you stay relevant? Well, you got to get young people. You got to get out on the, social media. You got to promote what they want to see. Scholarships, Journey to Greece, take on the Turkish lobby against in support of Saint Sophia, whatever it is. So that in Greek, there's a word for scene. It's called palander, which is like the joker in a deck of cards. You sort of have to be flexible and put yourself wherever it works for your audience to stay with you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Frosene, I would add to that I think this is a great question to ask. And, all the different organizations that I'm involved with have the same focus, is how do we make what's so important to us and to our current members relevant to the next generation? So at the Washington OXI Day Foundation, we've got our Philotimo Scholarship that we offer to young Greek Americans all across the country, saying, what does Philotimo mean to you? So it's taking kids that maybe aren't so Greek and asking them to watch our Philotimo video. We've got these leaders in the community talking about what is the definition of Philotimo, what it means to them. And these kids start to hear concepts, maybe non-Greek concepts to them that are important to them. Say, wow, I didn't realize that was a Greek thing. Now, National Hellenic Society, I'm a board member. We have the Heritage Greece program, the Heritage America program, where we take these students who, sign up for a fantastic trip to Greece or a trip to Washington. They meet with these fantastic people, hear about their life success stories and what it meant to them. Again, they hear about these traditional Greek concepts of hard work and family and faith and being true to who you are and those concepts that they say, wow, I didn't realize that was a Greek thing. You've got, Leadership 100 that I'm a board member of. We're trying to find ways to get that generation involved. So every group is kind of looking to that next generation and asking themselves, look, I think the old style, and I mean old meaning like the immigrant style, which worked at the time, was, listen, grab them, drag them to the dance, they'll meet a nice Greek boy, a Greek girl, and then they'll get it, right? And then they'll be part of the family. That just doesn't work with the next generation, with my generation, my kids' generation.
The Greek boys ran.
Not from you.
If I may, Frosene, add my 2 cents to this as well. Look, we're not a cultural organization. We're a public policy organization that promotes a specific message of advocating regarding some very hardcore issue, which is to say we're not warm and fuzzy. And that becomes a lot more difficult in terms of promoting that kind of a message. There isn't really a quid pro quo for your message, for your membership and donation to the organization, other than supporting the work that it does to promote the policy agenda. Having said that, though, the demographics, I think, is certainly hurting organizations on the public policy side. Hellenism, and I'll get to that in a minute, is defined so differently by so many different people. For one, as Basil could have said, is language. Another one, it's the church. It's Greek dancing. It's Greek food. It's going to Greece. It's a different concept. People have tried to define it for over 2,000 years, and we still don't have the proper definition for it. But being as it may, for the purpose of this discussion, it's important for the public policy dimension as we're promoting Greek American and Cypriot American relations. And I'm really, really fearful as to the future of the public policy message. I do believe organizations that are steeped in culture and other elements of Hellenism will continue to thrive because it also goes outside the traditional boundaries. And our demographics right now show us 80 to 90% interfaith marriages. No more infusion necessarily of Greeks coming from Greece, to keep it going. So there's more and more, mixed households. I'm not saying that as a negative. I'm just saying it's a fact, and you need to adapt to that fact. And public policy organizations like that are finding it, I have to admit, rather difficult in terms of the funding side of it. The public policy messaging is there. It's important. But how do you make a Greek American today understand that this is important for them to advocate for? And I'll just leave with one message that it's a little sobering. And I won't give you the exact statistics because you may be running for the hills. But a couple of years ago, when we did a major professional fundraising effort to increase our membership, and our message was one strictly on what AHI does. the public policy and help us support this. It was exceptionally not a good return. And maybe I shouldn't even be saying it, but I think it's important for, to have transparency and to understand what's going on out there. And organizations at the public policy level like ours are going to continuously be challenged. The work is very important, and we continue to believe in it, but how do you get Greek Americans to be aware of it, to be educated on these issues, and to take a proactive approach that ultimately affects U.S. interest? U.S. interest. We're not doing this just for Greece or Cyprus. We're doing it also for the strengthening of the relationship between these countries, and how do we promote U.S. interests in the region. And that's why we created the program for the students to be able to get an understanding. And the last thing I'll say on this point is, under our foundation, we attempted to try to define where the future of Hellenism in America is going. We've had 18 conferences in different cities across the country in the United States, trying to tackle exactly some of these issues and how our community is evolving over the next century. We now have at our possession a volume of 500 pages that have been edited from some of the best papers presented over the years. And this year, with a donation that we got from one of our members, we are planning to publish that proceedings of this volume, which will really be one of a kind, sometime by the end of the year, early next year. And we've also tried to create one of the largest libraries with volumes dedicated to these issues that I would venture to say that you wouldn't find maybe in any other library in the United States dedicated specifically to the issues of the Eastern Mediterranean.
May I interject one item before Jim answers on this topic that's relating to what Nick said?
Yes.
When he used his demographic information, 70, 80, 90%. Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, there would be a mixed marriage, and then the first thing you heard from the old people was, oh, Xeni, oh, Xeni. I think that's changed in our culture and in our communities, because I think we perceive people coming into our church that weren't born into it. It doubles our effectiveness rather than waters down who we think we used to be, right? So I look at it from the perspective of bring everybody in, teach them the greatest thing that we have, teach them to be a Hellene. So I wanted to just follow up on what Nick had to say on that. Thanks.
You're welcome. And I have a couple questions for you. Jim, I'd like you to go ahead and respond, and then I have a couple questions.
Yes, actually, in a couple of areas like that. I wanted to say first to Mike, the Philoptimo video that you produced is still very valuable. I still find it very effective with students that love to see it and get a better definition of themselves, really. And it's that concept that I see carried over to the students when they're traveling to Greece. You know what we don't see very often in all of our programs that take Greek kids to Greece is the feeling of comfort to go with other students. Maybe your Greek's not that good. Maybe you're not quite comfortable on your own. But when you see there's others like you and you can share in the experience, you experience a new love affair with Greece, a new love affair with your heritage. And that's a commitment that goes on. We just had students from 7 years ago that just got married from one of the trips, and they'd lived across the continent from each other. And one mother kept telling me, oh no, this can never happen. Why did you introduce them? And 7 years later, they're happily married. But that's a very important factor of carrying that culture. Several years ago, I did a Department of Education study. I think Basil probably will remember that we asked similar questions by generation, from first, second, third, and fourth generation, and what was being kept, what was being lost. And as you can probably guess, number one in terms of loss was language within this. But in some very interesting ways, the third generation was sharing more culturally with the first generation than what you would have expected. The second generation did a lot to try to assimilate, Americanize, shorten their names. But all of a sudden, the third and the fourth generation kids were now looking at it as something of value that we need to reach out and cultivate more, because they've expressed that so many ways in terms of the trips that we've been on and in the study that all share that same experience. And it's so valuable. I have, before I did the Journey to Greece and I did my previous program that went to Greece as well, I now have mothers coming back to me and saying, do the program again. We'd like to come with you as a parent and bring our kids. And then they want to come and bring their daughters and their sons to come as well. And they surprised me last year at one of the Greek festivals. They came as a little team together. Here's 25 years later, they're wanting to recreate their experience. And it shows you that lasting value that's there. All of us have contributed to that. All of our programs have something of value. Having a unity forum and a focus, I think we should expand those numbers, expand those opportunities for us within this. That's something that is very important to continue. And from maybe we can do a Philoptimo 2 movie. Maybe we can expand the opportunities for us. Your DC Greeks program, where the kids get together socially, is very valuable like that. But we have to be willing to try that and to get it going. And I think the timing is good for us. It's a time when I think those younger students and younger professionals even more need to go out. And Frosene, if I can just go back for a second to the Oakland Church, you do such a great job of bringing those kids in and getting them involved as young adults that are, beyond college, they're working, but they find a connection. Right. And I haven't seen that quite as effective anywhere else as I've seen there. And my kids are witness to it and part of it, even are helping serve lunch and things now too, or coffee rather, when we're back in session. But I think those kinds of activities are important within it. We kind of forget after Goya, after Sons and Maids, after a Journey to Greece, then what? And it's the then what? And there's a gap. Look at your communities. Where are the 30-somethings? And are they back? Their parents and grandparents are there, but are they there? Are they part of those experiences? And that's what we have to try to cultivate more and stimulate more. And I think we have the capacity. My study then showed there certainly was a commitment to it, a willingness to it. And I think the National Hellenic Museum that you're contributing to as an organization is very effective in keeping our heritage alive and the research. And that's one thing we found is a very strong commitment to what your heritage is, what your heritage believes, and how do we research it. We don't do a very good job community-wise of keeping that history alive, keeping those resources alive. National Hellenic Museum is doing that, and I hope, I know Utah has a great museum with it, and Seattle has a great one going, but we need to do that because the interest from those third and fourth generations is to look and study that as well. So I think all of these things are something we can all contribute to, and I hope to see more of.
Great, thank you. Basil, I have a quick question for you from a viewer on Facebook asking if you think the merger between the men and women is necessary with AHEPA with daughters and sons and maids, and should it all be combined since life is different now than it was 99 years ago?
Yeah, so that's a question that's asked very frequently, and that's a little bit above my pay grade. I don't have the ability to answer that question, although I understand the motivation behind it. One of the examples I can give is that the AHEPA in Australia is co-ed. I mean, it's one group, men and women and all the kids together. So because of our structure, and for so many years, I mean, we were created as a fraternal type of, organization. So currently, I don't know that that's something that we're discussing, but that's not outside the realm of possibility, sometime in the future.
Okay,
That's not really an answer, but it's certainly something that we're aware of.
but it's addressing. That's great. I'm going to start this next area with Mike because I know he has a hard stop in about 20 minutes, so we want to get you in here. A little segue to what we're doing, which is in regards to the miracle of our technology and Zoom, and it's something that we never could have really imagined how many years ago, right? And look at how it arrives in this point in time. So how can technology reinforce, do you think, rather than replace face-to-face interaction once we have COVID in the rearview mirror? Mike, why don't you start on that?
That's an important question to ask, because I think technology has enabled a lot of folks professionally to continue to do what they do. However, I still would argue that nothing replaces that face-to-face interaction, whether it's in my daily job as a lobbyist on Capitol Hill, meeting with senators and members. I can still see them and their staff on Zoom and on calls, but a lot of what I do is travel around the country to different events. Jim, I really miss being out for your fantastic gala, or going to Nick's gala or Basil's events, and those are something we all miss, but they also serve an important purpose. First, for the organizations to as a fundraiser to raise awareness as well, but also an opportunity for people to have important interactions back and forth that further solidify our missions and what we're doing for the community and the country. So I do think technology provides a great opportunity. I think there'll be a new world once we come out of this COVID. People will be working different ways, more people working from home. However, I'm a little bit old school this way, would think that it's important not to entirely replace some of the other ways that we interacted before quarantine.
So if I can jump in on this one, because I don't know that anybody suffers more than the AHEPA, because our chapter structure, our monthly or bi-monthly meetings are the ones that have suffered the most. And of course, for the first time since World War II, the AHEPA is not having a national convention, a Supreme Convention. So the advent of technology is great. The connectivity that it provides is really kind of cool. I remember when I first started with AHEPA in 1990, a past president died. I don't remember who it was, but my job was I had to send Western Union telegrams to all the other past presidents telling them that they died. If I told my kid today what a Western Union telegram thing was, I mean, he'd look at me like I'm from another planet. So technology is great. It keeps us updated. It keeps us in the now. It keeps us connected to a certain degree. But I don't know that our organization or even our ethnicity will allow us to be disconnected from that personal touch, what Mike was talking about. So,
if I may also pick up on Basil, we are definitely a people of hugs and kisses. And we just can't do that, via Zoom. Although we had to adapt. We used the word adaptability earlier in terms of what organizations do. So we had to adapt during this pandemic, and for how long more it will be. I do believe this is a technology that's here to stay. It's very useful, and that has provided us with an opportunity to certainly have a much more greater outreach in terms of our messaging to an audience that we would never necessarily ever been able to reach out to. Although I am definitely old school, and I got 10 years on Mike, and there's no way that I would ever want to see this substitute, for meeting in person and enjoying each other in fellowship. And that's really how relationships are built. They're not built via Zoom. They're built by sitting across from each other, breaking bread, and telling stories and camaraderie and so forth. So what I'm hoping is, because of so many opportunities we've had to Zoom and have these outreaches, that once we do come back to normal, whenever that normal will finally take place again, it will, that maybe it will entice the people who have seen us on Zooms and the work that we do, that now they might be more accessible to want to come to our events that are live and in person, which is just absolutely critical. I think not just to our community, but in life in general, frankly.
Yeah.
If I can jump in on that as well, I had to adjust to this with students very quickly when the COVID crisis began, because all these universities where I do the Model United Nations programs all had to go online. And then it was Claremont McKenna, UC San Diego, USC, all of them. And students were reluctant to an online conference versus getting together and live with it, but they adjusted quickly and contributed very quickly. So I think now it's not, and I agree, it's never a substitute, but it would be a very good supplement and can reach a greater audience. And a combination of our live events, I think, will actually be increased by our ability now to hold gatherings online, to reach more people for meetings as well. And it is going to be a hybrid. And I think this might provide more of that opportunity. I mean, we're all, kicking and screaming down the road, being forced to sit in front of a computer all day. Yeah. But I think in the long run, when we do meet again, this will be a great opportunity. And it can certainly add a lot, particularly combining it with our other objective is the involvement of youth with it. And when I say youth, I'm talking about post-college too, the ones that are in the workforce that are not completely involved in the community activities. That's where we really need to really focus on more. No one has really done that within that, and there is a great need for it.
Well, I can say living in the San Francisco Bay Area, it has been a great alternative to sitting in traffic. You save a lot of time that way. You get more done. So here's a fun.
I can get to USC in half the time now.
Yes, there you go. Here's a great question for you something to ponder. So with Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson now becoming Greek citizens, how do we make Americans feel like there's a bit of Greek in all of us? Go ahead, Mike. You start.
Thank you. And that's really what the Washington OXI Day Foundation is all about, right? Is to make these Greek ideals resonate with everyone, right? And people having the courage to say OXI, and people getting the OXI Courage Award, people that you're reading about that are getting Nobel Peace Prizes getting the OXI Courage Award. People ask, well, what's OXI? Or what's philotimo? And then the ability to explain that and explain something that we're all very proud of as Greeks. And so I think that, and look, I think I come from a particularly unique perspective in that, and I've had the pleasure of being invited to speak to Greek American youth groups across the country. And I will put up a picture of my kids. And I say that I am a very proud son of a non-Greek mother and the very proud husband of a non-Greek wife. And so my kid, as involved as my family has been in the promotion of Hellenism and Orthodoxy for 3 generations now, over 85 years, my kids are 3rd generation, 1/4 Greek. So what does Hellenism and Orthodoxy mean to them? And that's the question that I think all of these groups are trying to ask. And you try to find that traction point of something that's important in their life, and then show them actually there's a Greek root to that. There's something that you should be proud of in that area of your life that has to do with Hellenism and Orthodoxy. So that's, and the more non-Greeks or Philhellenes we can bring into that process, the better.
If I may pick up on that in the sense of what Basil said earlier, so I can maybe a little further clarify what I wanted to say. Maybe it didn't come out necessarily in the right context. And I'm speaking from the point of view of just the public policy of what we do. I totally agree in terms of the concept of bringing in, people into our community and expanding the circle of Philhellenes, which ultimately has been an exceptional component of the history of the Greek nation, going back obviously to 1821 and the 200 years that we're going to be celebrating of next year's Greece's independence. The Philhellenes played an important role in that capacity and have continued to do so. So I have no doubt, that those who come into the cultural component of Hellenism will continue to expand and grow in that cultural component of Hellenism. But I submit the other thing for organizations like ours that are strictly on the public policy agenda. that becomes a little bit more difficult in that regard in terms of trying to get somebody to identify with that. But I submit the only thing that ties us and have a prefix that says Greek to an organization is the country of Greece. And I put Cyprus within this context as well, okay? So if you remove that, and if we lose the battle in the Eastern Mediterranean and the siege that is taking place and continues to take place in Greece, if we lose it there and win it here, I don't know how we win in the end. And the question and I'm reminded, and I've had discussions with prominent Greek Americans about this, and I have people come up to me, I'm not going to mention names, obviously, and they come up to me and say, Nick, I don't give a damn about Cyprus. I don't give a damn about Greece. I give a damn only about Hellenism. I don't think you dissociate or can dissociate, okay, one from the other as it relates to the country and the problems that are faced in the Eastern Mediterranean. That is, I just wanted to clarify where I'm coming from on that. You're going to get 2,000 kids or whatever it is, Frosene, to come out to that dance competition that you do in California, which is one of the biggest, 5,000. But again, how many of them are going to come out of there understanding the problems that Greece and Cyprus face in the Eastern Mediterranean and ties them to the culture?
Well,
So,
Nick, let me ask you something. For example, so here in this country now, a lot of kids are not engaged in politics, but now they're becoming engaged by the nature of what we're all living in, right? We're living through this now. There's more awareness, engagement. How do you make what's relevant, what you're dealing with, to their lives? How can you capture that and make it relevant to what you're trying to do?
You're asking me?
You, yes, Nick.
Well, first of all, we live in a country where citizen responsibility is paramount to the success of our democracy. And without citizen responsibility, which as we're entitled to under the Constitution and the Founding Fathers, it doesn't work. As simple as that. But that means at all levels, of government. It doesn't mean just going out to the streets, okay, and getting caught up in a movement, okay, at a moment in time without understand completely all elements regarding this particular movement and other things that we are faced with. Okay, that's just one component of promoting advocacy. It's the people we elect. It's the Supreme Court judges that no one pays attention to and who are there for lives, and in many ways are much more important than whoever sat for 4 years at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. They ultimately make, and decide on judicial matters that affect every single one of our lives. And I would venture to say very, very small part of our population really pays attention to that component. You got the judicial, the legislative, and the executive that all works together. And that is one area you don't pay attention to. But it just means citizen responsibility, which comes down to the Greek traditions, okay, as set forth, by Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, and all the stories we have heard regarding that came out of these great thinkers, that Western civilization, and fundamentally the founders of the United States of America instilled in our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence to set the groundwork and foundation for our country.
So, Frosene, if I can just jump in and sort of answer your first question, and then talk to Nick's civics presentation. And I want to do it before Jim gives us the academic answer. So the first question that you asked was, how do you identify, or how do you measure what makes you Greek or not Greek or something like that? So I would say to you that my answer is very simple. If you've ever opened a book and read anything, it makes you Greek. Because there's some kind of context or relevance that comes from these ancient thinkers that have created everything that we live for today. I remember reading a paper once, and this is what Nick was talking about, that the framers of this country debated at length the value of what democracy was in ancient Greece, even to the point that the language was almost discussed that they would use Greek as a language instead of English in the United States. So the connection that not only the United States, but the world has to what it is to be Greek, I think everybody shares that. Math, science, all those disciplines that you always hear about were things that the Greeks, if not invented, certainly perfected, right? So I think we're all Greek in some way, in a very, very removed way. Now, Larigakis' thing about democracy and our civics, certainly getting swept up in a movement is far different than being a functional part of what this society has been doing for the last 200 and some years, 250, whatever it is, years. America is a very large country and a great country. There is no other country in the world like it. That's why everybody wants to come here.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that we've allowed this democracy to live the way it does bodes well for us as Greek Americans, because it's almost was created for us in the way that we have the work ethic, the morality ethic, the customs, the issues, everything. So, you know, from a personal perspective, I think it's a wonderful, wonderful existence to have. So Jim can tell us.
Thank you for the lead in, Basil.
Jim can tell us where I'm wrong.
No, not wrong at all. And but to continue both, because I think what Nick was saying as well are both important to do. The study of our history, of our background, our heritage, our religion are definitely important. A lot of what we don't do, however, is talk about our history in America, the Greek American history, the March in Selma, why AHEPA was created in Atlanta, how Greeks were discriminated against in Omaha, in Utah mines. Those are very pertinent stories, maybe more now than ever within that. How many times have we now seen the picture of Archbishop Iakovos marching with Martin Luther King? Where were we portraying that earlier? Now that there's a crisis, we're starting to portray that. The National Hellenic Museum, again, is doing something with it, but our communities need to do more of that. We need to create archives and histories and present how organizations began and what they went through. And what Gene Mossaidis told us when we started to lobby, Nick, was we're Hellenes, we're Americans of Hellenic descent. That's how you go to a congressman. The first ones to understand that were the staffers in the offices that went out and helped to start the lobby within that. And they basically helped educate the rest of us on what to do. It's making that connection. And we certainly have volumes that we can add to it. And look what's ahead for us. This coming year, we have the 100th anniversary of AHEPA. We have the 100th anniversary of the Archdiocese. We have the 200th anniversary of Greece. And we have the 25th 100th anniversary of the Battle of Salamis and Thermopylae. This should be a time of great unification. It should be an effort from all of us in our organizations to see where we can proceed to lead that march, to have that determination of what we can do and make that connection. Mm-hmm. When a student that's fourth generation wants to make a connection to their grandparents, let's have those histories available to them, what those commitments were and how we were taught. Theodore Saludos did that for me. Gene Mossaidis did that for me. I was 22 years old coming back from Cyprus, and we were locked in the middle of this, but they opened up that window. And we need to make those connections today. The Philoptomo movie begins that. A Philoptomo 2 may continue that. But unless our communities are dedicated to connecting that history to today of the young immigrants, of what they went through and what our history is here. This should be the year of great unity, a greater commitment to Hellenism, and a greater commitment for student involvement and young professional involvement that we haven't had before. Let's make it now. Let's take the opportunity was here, and we still have that battle to fight. I have to also say, in addition to the American Hellenic Council, I'm still president of the Manatos Society, which is the oldest Greek organization in Los Angeles, is over 100 years old, that my papu helped start in 1909. And it's still many of the same families that are connected and still follow that. But those are the traditions sometimes that get missing along the way. And we need to make that connection again. And that connection will give us that commitment and the involvement in the communities for a new AHEPA, a new IHE, a new commitment to the National Hellenic Society. And again, I have to emphasize our programs in Greece are one of the most valuable things we do. And I look at that from a longevity viewpoint, that I'm looking back at those students and what they've become as a result of those trips. And that we should have a greater commitment. Not just take 15, 20, 100 students, but let's do a few thousand students and take them abroad. Let's take the young adults abroad and connect that too. All of these things are links in the chain, but wouldn't it be the time to do this for that anniversary year next year for AHEPA, the Archdiocese, Greece, and the famous battles that we all look to in our heritage? I don't think we've ever had an opportunity quite like this. In its time, we can connect through our Zoom conferences as well, hopefully in not too distant future, of live events. Why can't we have unity forums regionally and maybe a national one to do this and get a focus that all of us can contribute to and all of us can recommit to? I think that's very important, and I think we all have the capacity. All of us are saying very valuable things for us in the future, and I think all of us can contribute to that.
Frosene, if I could interject just very briefly, I need to take off my hat as the executive director of OXI Day and as a board member of NHS and put on my hat as president of Manatos and Manatos. And one of the things we do is try to help very qualified Greek Americans and Cypriot Americans running for Congress get elected. I am co-hosting a fundraiser at 7 o'clock on another Zoom call for Chris Manatos, who's running for Congress up in Joe Kennedy's seat in Boston. So I want to thank NHS for bringing us together, all the great work you do. Thank you to Nick and AHI, Basil and AHEPA, Jim and American Hellenic Council, Frosene and Elios Society, and all the other wonderful things you do. This has been a real pleasure being with you all today. And unfortunately, I have to jump off here, and hope to be with you all again soon. Take care, everybody. All the best. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, everybody.
You know, if I may just 1 second, pick up on the importance of the history regarding an understanding of the history in the Greek American community. And I'm sorry that Mike had to leave, but his organization focuses on this. And the significance of this is paramount, in my opinion, as it relates to a seminal moment within the Greek American community, okay, and coming from where it was in the turn of the 20th century until October 28th, 1940. Okay, because we all know the signs the photographs that we see where there were signs that said no blacks, no dogs, and no Greeks allowed. Okay, but literally, and I hate to keep bringing it back again, but because it's the nature of what I do on the public policy side, and the importance that we got to make sure, to pay attention to what goes on in the Eastern Mediterranean, it was still Mother Greece, okay, whose sons and daughters had to leave because unfortunately Mother Greece was not able to accommodate them, not because they didn't want to, but because that's the way it was. And they had to go to the New World, and they followed all the problems of which AHEPA was created to assimilate them into the American culture. But it was Mother Greece who came to, in my opinion, to their rescue in some ways, because of what they did on that day against fascism and their first victory against the Axis in World War II. And from that moment on, we've never looked back, but only forward as a Greek American community. And I get pissed off, okay, when you look at history books in this country, and maybe around the world, and when you look at World War II, and it's never brought up. It's not even a footnote. There are no movies on this, okay, that are made out of Hollywood. How many movies have we had on Dunkirk? Okay, a failure, okay, of the British, frankly, okay, at the time. But yet on something that was a major turning point of World War II and a major turning point of the Greek American community in the United States, it's not anywhere that resonates within our current youth and our current generation of Greek Americans. And I just want to add that to the discussion.
Well, Nick, I can add, my father was in the OSS with the Greek battalion, and they were just recognized just, 2 months ago for the 75th anniversary of the OSS, given the Congressional Gold Medal. So look how many years, right? I want to thank you all, and thank you for allowing me to be a spectator and a participant on the site. And I'm going to throw it to Art, who has some words to share.
Well, Jim, Greek minds think alike, because you took a lot of my thunder about next year. I think if we look back, back in time, I always say that, what the New Testament is to the Old Testament, the United States is to Greece. Because whether it's our language, there's, I think, 80,000 words we use every day. You could, again, point to the arts and the sciences and all this other stuff. But what did the Greeks do? And what, even our faith, too, in many ways. It always pushed us to be the best. It acknowledged, even the Greek gods had human frailties to them. Yet they always tried to be the best. You look at a vase, you see runners, right? Always, never looking backwards, always looking forward. Not to revel in past glories, but to continue in the future glories. And by the way, marathon, there were no team sports back then. And then when you were crowned with the laurel of victory, you brought great joy, as our Nats did last year, to baseball. Brought great joy to the entire community. So in 2021, which is the 200-year anniversary, you're right, Jim, we have a huge opportunity. Because the Greek War of Independence, like so many other, and we've got such a troubled past, just like our friends, an old civilization, like our friends in the Jewish community. We've suffered, 400 years of domination. But it was the Greek War of Independence that in this country instilled a movement called the Greek Fire Movement, which looked at the hypocrisy of slavery and women's rights. And there's even some famous paintings, about the Greek slave market. I think I forgot the artist. He's a French artist. Beautiful, naked Greek girl, 17 years old, at a slave market being sold sort of as a sex slave. And think about the sensibilities back then. And these images were an affront, to the intellectuals of the time in the United States. If you read Daniel Webster's oration, it's amazing. And it's a huge opportunity to seize on these common themes together. It's a huge opportunity for us, and we're blessed at the NHS to have the best minds. There's not an area of our lives, professional lives, that you can't point to successful Greek Americans. And what led them? Yesterday, I interviewed Stelios Papadopoulos, chairman of Biogen, the chairman of and co-founder of Exelixis, the chairman of Regulus Therapeutics, the godfather of biotech that came in 1969 with $200 in his pocket and became the godfather. We found a country where the values and what we have within us that is meant to be shared with all, and the nation that can propel you upwards. And that's what I think the United States is. And I think that's what we all need to do. I think I agree with Nick that we need to return and to refer to Greece, not the glory that was Greece, but the glory that is Greece. All of us and through our fellow Greeks. And I think it's not a challenge. The opportunity for us to band together and work on doing some really spectacular things that highlight who we are presents itself. And you're right, Jim. Never more like this. And I think these themes resonate. One of our members, two of our members, Dean Metropoulos, and his lovely wife Marion, who wrote the script, wrote for the first time, and Nick, you hit it, wrote the movie Cliffs of Freedom. That looks, it's a love story, forbidden love story, set within the context of the Greek War of Independence.
Mhm.
At least, with big name stars, that at least to the forefront, people can see what's important about that war and about that. And you hit another thing, Nick, and all of us, is sometimes, especially in today's spoon-fed Twitter generation, you can have all the substance and reasons and rationale, and just a video will do a much better job. Schindler's List is a fabulous story, but it's also about issues that resonate with all America, with all people. The brutal imagery we saw that spurred this whole movement was a video taken by a 17-year-old of George Floyd. I don't care who he was. If you have an ounce of humanity in you, it was an affront, that powerful imagery. And sometimes we need to learn how to use those images, stories, to be able to share what we go through, and our trips to Greece that we all have done. That's what it is, really. It's just a movie. It's not an image or a movie. You're living it, but it exposes them in a way that's unforgettable, that really makes and the kids come back different human beings. That's why our friends in the Jewish community have sent over 400,000 kids to Israel for free.
Yeah.
And whether they go to synagogue or not, they connect with the heritage that goes back thousands of years, that also propels them to be the best that they can be, as we are. So let's work. It's cheesy and corny sometimes to say we'll work together, Oli Mazi, and we've heard all this stuff. We really need to commit to do this together, and I think Zoom makes it easy to do it. And I think we need to bring others to the conversation as well, and we'll continue to do that. And one thing that we're doing right now, we're saving this video and archiving it with the National Hellenic Museum. We are teaching our 500 plus, not all of them are participating, alumni that we sent to Greece on how to do oral history interviews. All of you have constituencies, whether it's you, Frosene, at Elios, Nick, your Hellenic Business Network, obviously Basil with AHEPA, and your many, many chapters. Let's record the stories of the people that we're losing every day that can tell our history in a compelling way. And you can do it through Zoom, right from your, so easily. And send those to the National Repository of the Greek American Story in Chicago. And John Calamos, the board, boy, do they want to do it, and we want to help them. These are things that we can do, preserve our heritage, to celebrate our heritage and disseminate it for future generations, and not just for Greeks, for all, because I think the Greek American story is the great American story in many, many ways. So thanks to everybody. You're all great friends. Frosene, thank you for coming in last minute and doing such a great job. And I look forward to working together, and have a great summer. Rest of the summer is bizarre.
Thanks for having us. Thank you, Arthur and Frosene. Thank you.
Everybody enjoy the rest of the summer.
Yeah. Stay safe.